Welcome to another Beyond Bitcoin Dev Voice Hangout. Today is Saturday, the 7th of June, 2014. This is a BitShares Dev Hangout with Dan Larimer. Please feel free to record these sessions and propagate them free of charge. The content created here is as open source as the community itself. If you cannot attend these sessions, feel free to visit the Beyond Bitcoin Show subreddit. There you will be able to find information on future Dev Voice Hangouts and both post your own questions and vote on others. We rely on votes to gauge the perceived importance of the questions asked, so the more questions and votes, the better. With that said, it is our hope that you will gain as much from the community's questions as you do from the developers' answers. Now let us get on with this Hangout. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome. We have a lot of updates for you this week. It's been a very productive week.
Sounds good. Can you give us some details?
So in the past week, we have done several iterations of our test network, including the launch of a web interface that allows people to transfer assets. Did any of you get an opportunity to try that out this week?
No, actually, I was going to ask you about it this time around. I saw it 2 days ago on the forum that you guys updated it, and I'm assuming that it was updated probably as soon as you guys actually had the functionality in place. So it's probably like a good timestamp to see when you guys completed this. But I have been reading the forum posts. I didn't see anything giving like a link to it or anything like that.
The link was in the original post at the top of the thread. We will be posting a new test network for everyone today or tomorrow at the latest. That is hopefully going to have a complete snapshot of the XT network from February 28th, combined with more delegates and a otherwise be fully functional.
Could you explain what more delegates means?
So far, our test networks have only had 7 delegates. We're going to increase that to the targeted 99 delegates.
So you started out with a few delegates just to test during the test chain, just to make sure that things were going correctly before you scaled it up, essentially.
It just simplified things, yes.
And what is the reason to include the February 28th snapshot?
This is primarily done for testing wallet import functionality and as a dry run for the eventual launch.
Okay, great.
Some of the other things people have been doing this week is they have created their own assets, love and freedom, on our test network, and they have been sharing their love and freedom with each other.
Yeah, did you read it, Deluo?
No, I didn't.
This is the correct thread then. They're talking about, you can actually see the screenshots that they created there. They're passing it around all over the place, man.
So in addition to that, we also have the ability to vote for delegates, and you can view your transaction history, your account, sending to a name. All of that functionality is working. We are actively trying to have the web interface catch up to the non-web, to the command line interface. But there's probably going to be a week or two delay when we get a feature implemented on the back end and when it shows up in the web interface.
Sounds good. So we can actually, anybody can start up this web interface and start playing with it this week then, essentially.
That is correct. We are working on a desktop application that you can download, host the web interface for you. So that's being worked on by Valentine, who's on the call listening. I'm very excited to see how that progresses.
Welcome, Valentine. Thank you for being here, man. And do you guys have any idea when that's looking like it's going to be completed? Is it pretty close or far away?
I haven't looked at the work, but based upon the questions he's asking, it sounds like it's pretty close.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm sure people love hearing it.
I'm going to try to play with it today some. So the other thing we've been working on is a distribution model, a way of getting new users involved without ever having to see a public key or purchase a shares or whatever they're called from a Bitcoin exchange before they can register. So users will be able to sign up to a DAC with a registered account name with a starting balance without having to ever use a public key, transfer that, or any of those things.
So it'll go completely off of, it'll be a more user-friendly experience, essentially.
Exactly. We're going to use the idea of a faucet where the faucet will register your name for you and give you a small starting balance in exchange for verifying your identity.
And could you explain a little bit, what do you mean by verifying identity?
We just want to make sure that people don't drain the faucet and take all the money. So you have to prove that you have a valid email address, that it's tied to a Gravatar account with valid images there. And we are considering SMS validation as well. Your identity is private. This is just a way of making sure people are unique and increasing the difficulty of creating lots of fake identities to take money out of the fund.
It's only for the faucet.
Yeah, this is only for the faucet. This is not tied to the blockchain. Although we will be putting your Gravatar ID, the hash of your email address, if you will, into the blockchain when you register with the faucet. And we're going to also encourage other users to do the same. This performs a kind of two-factor authentication. When you give someone your name and they look up your account in the directory, they'll be able to see your Gravatar icon and image and know that they've got the right person. Now, that's not perfect. Someone could, of course, claim their account is also you by putting your identity next to their account. But the combination of you telling someone that your name is Fuzznuts, and they go there and they look up Fuzznuts and they see that, oh yes, this is tied to Fuzznuts ID, that's this kind of visual confirmation that will make the user experience more familiar, more pleasant. We now have images to go with every account in our system, at least for those who opt into that system. And of course, anyone who's getting free money from the faucet is being required to opt into that system.
So they can essentially get started in playing around with things through the faucet just by identifying, just by verifying that they are who they say they are. And that information is going to be stored essentially as a hash, and only you will have access to it. And
the hash is stored in the blockchain. It's the Gravatar ID. So everyone will be able to see that this account name is registered to this Gravatar ID.
Roger. So there could actually be new things built on top of that type of information, correct?
That is correct. The blockchain supports tying any metadata you like to an account that's registered. We are going to try to encourage users to attach meaningful identification information to their accounts, possibly even a signature verification of this information, so that you can have some kind of idea that, yes, this has been verified by the faucet versus this is just someone testifying about themselves.
And what is this faucet going to give them? PTS? BitShares?
It's going to give them shares whenever DAC is being registered.
Oh. So you can register essentially under any DAC and get funds from the faucet.
Yes, as long as the faucet is funded for that DAC, you'll be able to do that. And then what we are thinking is a referral system where you can refer your friends, and if they sign up via the faucet, you get a kickback as well. So you can get additional funds for sharing it and propagating it.
These are good thoughts.
And it's open source, so other communities could also use it.
Quite possibly. We are investigating all the options on that front. It might be the type of system that's best to keep closed source for our community until we get some foothold.
Right.
Makes sense. So essentially, I could, just for the users, I could go ahead, verify myself, my own identity, which is basically an avatar associated with a name and an account that can't be replicated. And I can go ahead and do that, get for whatever DAC that I want to register under, and then I can go out and say, I can grab Delulo and I can say, hey, if you go register and you put me as your referee, I will get another, this much, and I can split it between you and me. And people could actually go out, and it seems like a scalable solution. Do you guys see any problems to it as far as the community?
So far, people have liked what they heard. The only question becomes, where do the funds for the faucet come from? And that has not been decided at this point in time. But I suspect that we could set it up as a combination of donation and perhaps an initial allocation from the Genesis block for the faucet for some chains that don't have all their shares allocated.
Could you explain that part?
When a new DAC is launched, the people that are launching it get to decide how much money to allocate to various causes. So normally there's 10% AGS, 10% PTS, but you could also have, say, 10% faucet. And that would be a way of allocating some of the shares in a way that helps grow that DAC.
Yeah, and that's the reason I bring this up, because a lot of people think that the PTS AGS system is extremely mind-blowingly complex, but it really isn't. The system that you guys have put in place essentially allowed people to invest in you through the AGS fund as a donation based on their trust that you guys will give.
Investing in us in like you invest in a third-world child.
Okay. I never thought of you in that light, Bytemaster, but I guess we can go with that.
I'm just saying that it's not an investment from a. These are gifts that you're investing in the cause for your own treasures and recognition in the community, and that because you gave to us so that we can build these tools to make the world a better place, that those who are using our tools give back to those who gave. Not that they're required to by any legal contract of any shape or form.
Which really comes down to us making the decision of whether we're going to move forward with this kind of system where we help each other and honor the people who are trying to do good things in the community. Essentially, I want to get real quick back to that just to cover this. The AGS funds, if I start a DAC, I could essentially say, okay, I'm going to honor 10% of the initial of all of the stake in the DAC, so 1 million shares, 10% to PTS owners, 10% to AGS owners, which is angel shares, 10% to the faucet, which is what you're talking about, and 10% to Bitcoin holders. Is that correct?
You can do however you'd like to distribute it. The 10% is what we recommend, is what we feel comfortable saying, yes, these are good actors, and that they are, recognizing people in a meaningful way. Some people have tried to just do 1%, but that's kind of like giving someone a small tip. It's almost insulting.
Well, to me, I don't even know if it would be insulting so much as for the effort that it would take for me to go and get the shares, and the fact that so many people were probably going to end up doing it this way for just one, one share for every 100 I have in the other. it's going to be kind of difficult at first to understand the value proposition just for going to get it. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
So I guess it comes down to an incentive structure for the users to actually come on board, and it makes it easy for people to get into your DAC if they buy PTS, because as long as people appreciate and they're using the toolkit and they decide that they're going to honor that toolkit that you guys have created, people with PTS and AGS are going to probably get good karma back. Essentially like what you said last week with the karma.
I have a quick question. I wanted to see if you guys might have time to discuss about a discussion about share dilution. I don't know if maybe we could reserve that for after Bytemaster's, has to go do something else, but I think it's something that it's important to me to talk about anyway. I think it's an important concept as far as distribution of shares. I think the concept of being able to dilute shares over time could be very powerful.
It's very good. That's actually a big running thread on the forums for people who are interested in it.
I can make a quick comment on dilution. I think that dilution is... Sorry, it's not going to be so quick. I have to actually think very carefully how I'm going to say all this, because it's a very touchy subject, and I don't want to, create any enemies here, because I'm kind of on the fence on a lot of these issues. If you are attracting new capital, then it's not really dilution. But the challenge, of course, is figuring out whether or not the value of the capital you are attracting is greater than the amount you're diluting the shareholders. Ultimately, the only real test for that is whether or not the stock price goes up as a result of the so-called dilution. If the value of your shares after you've been diluted is higher than before you started, then it's a good thing. If it's lower, then that means it's a bad thing. That's how I view dilution. The issue with dilution is really one of property rights. And normally, when you have physical items, it's 100% yours or not. When you have an item like a share, you own a fraction of a whole. And to say that you cannot be diluted is to have the minority tell the majority that they can't issue new shares. And for the majority to say, well, we're going to dilute, then that's also in theory violating the rights of the minority who's having their shares diluted against their will. It's kind of you can't win either way. With or without dilution, you're harming parties. So the key is to focus on what's the value of the shares after the dilution. And if they go up, you're good. If it goes down, you're losing money. In the case of Bitcoin, obviously the dilution to the miners is not causing the share price to go down. But the other question you have to ask is down relative to what? Relative to what it was before. And in the case of Bitcoin, everyone's already priced in the expected dilution, so you're not going to be able to have a before and after. So I think when it comes to these new chains, the concept of using dilution as a means of paying people early on probably makes some sense to bootstrap the system. I can imagine a system with delegates that are paid not just from transaction fees, but from dilution, will result in a heavily competitive market for people trying to become a delegate. This is in turn a heavily competitive market of people trying to advertise themselves and the system and getting other shareholders to come on board and vote for them. So I think it's a powerful marketing system early on. It's very similar to giving your early employees stock options. And by diluting over time, and only to the people who are elected by the shareholders, it's a predictable system. But I think in the long run, all companies need to stop issuing shares, start actually buying back shares to prove that they are actually producing more value than they are consuming.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. Do you have anything to say, Agent?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really, really critical topic, and I think it's something that's really critical for us to all get our heads around and get our heads around it early. Um, every company that needs to grow does this, and it's critical. It really is. It's the key that's going to make us as shareholders have any power at all. If Bytemaster got in a car accident, there's no mechanism for us to bring on a new developer. If a developer has a lot to offer BitShares but has no stake in it, it's not a reasonable thing for us to expect that a developer will buy shares. A developer has to come out of pocket and buy into our company just so now they're going to volunteer their time to increase the value of the shares that they just bought. It's not something. There's no the only way for us to bring in a new developer is to be able to say, hey, listen, we lost a developer, but our company is worth money. We can give you shares of the company if you come help us out. Without that, our shares are where it's like Bytemaster said, we're running on karma. We're running on the goodwill. As shareholders, we have no power without the power to be able to do this.
It's actually a losing value proposition for the person who's doing the work. They're providing value, not receiving anything in return. I think an analogy here, sorry to interrupt you, but I had this analogy. I wanted to get it out there because I think it'll really highlight this for people. Imagine you had a company, had $1 million in the bank, and you divided and everyone had shares in this company. If you spend those dollars, you are diluting the shareholders because now there's less dollars backing shareholders. You took money out of the company, you took value out of it. There's less value per share. So whether you pay a developer $100,000 out of your cash supply, or whether you issue 10% more shares to pay the same developer, the economic effect on the shareholders is the same.
I agree. I think the other thing we have to keep in mind as far as transaction fees is, let's keep the big picture. This is a gigantic potential market for these DACs, and we need to go out and grab it and do it in an aggressive way. And the only way to have that aggressive growth is, being willing to leverage our market caps. If you have a restaurant and you saved up till you're 40 years old and mortgaged your house to buy a restaurant, and it's a great concept, and you want to build another restaurant in the town over, you can't charge your customers 3 times as much as you'd normally charge them to get the money to start expanding. It's not your customer's job to pay for your expansion. You need to bring in an investor. And if you don't do it quickly, somebody else is going to go into your restaurant and see the concept, and they're gonna take that nationwide instead of letting you take it nationwide. Early on, you can't charge enough transaction fees to fund the growth that we need to have.
But I appreciate the discussion because it seems like all individuals here don't discuss it in a political or ideological way, and because the term dilution kind of has a negative connotation, because in the way it's normally used, dilution refers to states diluting their currencies, but that in our case is a different situation because the shareholders are in control and have the say over whether there is a dilution or not. So that's would you agree that that's a different problem or a different issue there?
I think it's very different for the reason you specify. Also, the dilution is a little bit more. I guess I was going to say it's even just dilution, but in reality, right now with the fiat money system, you've got a few people that get to decide who when to dilute, how much to dilute, and who gets the money. And in this system, if you go with the delegate route, you're really keeping the control in the hands of the people that are being diluted rather than separating it. And I think that is what makes all the difference.
Can you explain how you were doing that?
Well, if we focus the dilution on just, how much we're going to pay the delegates, then people will be competing to get elected for these positions. And therefore, the shareholders, by voting for or against delegates, decide who gets the diluted money. And it's all proportional to their stake. This is in contrast to, say, Bitcoin, where whoever's willing to spend the most money gets to be diluted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things that I would like to add on this subject. I mean, just the fact that Bytemaster is building something, he's not honoring Bitcoin shareholders right now in these new DACs, and that it doesn't, because it makes no sense for him to honor Bitcoin shareholders. Whereas if Bitcoin shareholders had the power to dilute their shares, instead of going to a big investor, to get money to start Invictus, he could have just got money from Bitcoin holders voting for him, and therefore he would have probably honored Bitcoin holders. If you have the potential to pay people, everyone's going to be competing to add value to, even people who are not being paid are going to be competing to add value to BitShares because of the potential that they eventually could get paid. It's such a powerful motivating force that I think it would really fund the growth. I think we could try it with like a lottery deck. I mean, with a lottery deck, you could pay for an advertisement that returns 5 times the investment. But if without dilution, it makes no sense. There's no way to do that advertisement. Unless I owned more than 20% of the deck, I'm not going to pay for an advertisement that returns 5 times on investment to the deck because I'm going to lose money. You have to look at Next and look at how they're trying to build committees and take donations, and it's kind of a cluster, and you're going to get diluted anyway, regardless, because you're gonna start donating to these committees to actually do things on behalf of the deck, or else you're going to be a freeloader, or you're going to get diluted regardless.
I think this is a very powerful discussion, and it shows how important the metaphor is. When you have the currency metaphor, inflation is seen as sin and evil. And it is because of what it actually does to most people. You don't want to save in a currency that's being
devalued,
being debased or diluted to fund war and destruction. And basically saying that's like saying we're going to increase the share supply in order to buy resources and burn them. No one would want to own shares in that company, but that's sort of what we're all being forced to do under the fiat money system. But when we have a company being diluted, is the way the company can pay for things as a whole. And I think that that is fine in the short-term bootstrap phase. The goal needs to be to minimize that dilution. But I think Nikolai, aka Toast, has pointed out that the delegates have the power to return value to the shareholders by provably burning things. So even if you hard code in an amount of dilution going to the delegates, a delegate can win an election by saying, well, I don't have anything better to do with this money other than return it to the shareholders. And in that way, you can reduce the dilution or possibly actually pay a dividend. And that way that the shareholders decide when they get a dividend.
But the thing is, as far as I understood it, organizing whether or deciding on whether the dilution should be less or more, so whether company stock should be burned or not, having that decided by delegates, respectively by the voting on the policies of the different delegates, is limited to the amount of fees the company gets, like respectively the income the company has, which then goes to the delegates, and the delegates can decide and have make the crowd, the shareholders, vote for or against their policies. So the dilution would make sense in case the fees, respectively the income of the company, is not enough, and then there might be a necessity for dilution, right?
I'm suggesting that we could have a very simple policy in place where the fees are perhaps always burned and the delegates receive a stipend of new issuance or dilution. And the delegates themselves, once they're elected, they have the ability to pay fees and basically accept no salary or anywhere in between. That gives the shareholders the ability to control the rate of dilution by who they elect for delegates. So if you have, it also allows you to set a maximum rate of dilution. So it seems like Bitcoin is pretty stable and going up in value even with a 10% dilution rate. I think that might be a reasonable target to pay the delegates 10% per year, which if you have 100 delegates, each delegate is getting 0.1%.
And they're building the infrastructure and strengthening the security of the network in so doing.
Exactly. But at the same time, at any point, the shareholders can say, no, we don't want to spend all that money on this. We are going to elect delegates that are going to give us back some of that. And they do so, and you can stop the dilution.
But this is limited to the amount of fees the DAC gets.
No, this is not limited to that. You can actually issue new shares to pay the delegates, and then have the fees story shares on.
But by default, the delegates only get the fees, right?
Well, there is no default. We're talking about abstract systems here. So whatever you want the default to be.
The default's more like a market-based mechanism, right?
Right now, fees are set based on controlling a targeted bandwidth, which is independent of the amount that's actually paid in fees. You can pay more fees. It's also independent of what the delegates get paid. We can pay the delegates 100% of the fees, a fraction of the fees, none of the fees, just give them a fixed amount of new issuance. These are all options that are possible. I don't want to suggest any one be a default.
Okay, and can you expand real quick on how the delegates are going to decide whether there should be dilution or not? Like, not only from the fees and burning them or not, but also dilution by the issuance of new shares.
Delegates are competing on many factors. If you just assume that all delegates are paid from dilution and the network hard codes 10% dilution divided up among all the delegates per year. Now delegates are competing for these jobs. There's 99 jobs available and people are competing for them. Well, you can compete by either promising to do advertising campaigns, hosting better services, or you can compete by charging a lower fee and returning the value to the shareholders.
Right. Okay. But the question is, who decides on the 10% per year dilution then?
That can be decided at the start of the particular DAC. That way, the shareholders know what they're getting into. They know the agreement. They know the terms. And you're not changing the terms on people. And I think that is what people really don't like more than anything else, is that they have an agreement and then someone unilaterally changes the agreement about what the terms of their investment are going to be in a way that negatively impacts their investment decision.
Okay, and would that decision be redone or like voted upon every year again?
I think that can be up to the rules of the individual DAC. It's entirely possible that the DAC could set a maximum amount of dilution, that the shareholders can elect delegates that will change the rate between 0 and the maximum. And if 51% of the delegates agree to change the maximum rate, then all delegates have to take a pay cut. But otherwise, if you can't get 51% to agree to change the dilution rate, then the dilution rate will be decided upon by a per delegate basis, individually returning value to the shareholders.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, that makes sense. And so Trogdactyl, so I think his concerns were, so maybe you could say that yourself, but the way I understood it is, he said that this could all get out of control, and like in the future, more and more, there's more and more delusion, and the company, that there's a danger that the company is realizing that they are not really making any profit, and they are pushing that away or ignoring that, and trying to solve the problem, which is not solvable if the DAG is not profitable. Trying to.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
To me, as I'm listening to you guys saying this, you're talking about like a single DAC, and I'm thinking there's going to be so many competing DACs for lotteries, for insurance, for gaming, for whatever people are going to come up with, and the open source nature of this, doesn't it kind of make it so if I come up with this great idea and I have one little thing wrong, like for instance, I airdropped on the wrong people, or I didn't airdrop on people, or rather give 10% or 20% to a certain communities or developer, and it's like Bitcoin, or if essentially if the rules are written incorrectly or in a way that's not the most efficient for bootstrapping your DAC. I mean, all these things, there are going to be multiple competing chains. So wouldn't that essentially make the value proposition for PTS and AGS even higher? Because then that you're distributing your risk amongst all the DACs that are going to honor the toolkit they've been given to use. Does that make sense?
I think you're right there. I would like to address the concern that people won't realize whether or not they're profitable. If you look at profitability as the value of your shares going up, even if the percentage ownership is going down, that's the same thing as people putting capital into the company, or the company accumulating value in their savings account. I think that is a good measure of profitability. And I know this might seem contradictory to what I've said before, but this is primarily because this particular discussion has changed my perspective a little bit from the gut reflex of inflation is bad, build these systems without any inflation, and the only profits are from fees. I think that when you're starting a bank, you want to get people to invest in the bank and deposit money with you, and that causes it to go up. It doesn't matter if you're profitable by charging high enough fees to cover all your expenses if no one's using your bank. So you really need to look at the entire picture. Is more value accumulating to the system? Are people in society as a whole valuing your shares more or less? And that is the key. Now, accepting fees and increasing your ownership causes your shares to go up in value as well. But that's not the only way to do so. And I think that we need to recognize that fact, that people depositing money into a company makes it more valuable. And that's the same thing as the demand increasing it as more and more people decide that they want to value your company.
Right. So I think the majority here agrees that dilution is a powerful tool for making the DAG, respectively the company, a success. And the two arguments against it that came from Trog were, one, the shareholders are ignoring the fact that the DAG is not profitable, and are therefore trying to dilute the shareholders and invest more and more into marketing, whereas the DAG is not profitable and it could never work. And the second argument was that, what was it? That so there's a big network effect, and it's actually not as easy to just change to a different DAG or a competing DAG that is more profitable and that does not do any share dilution. And so yeah, those were kind of the concerns. I mean, Trog maybe could say better, but
well, the rule is you have to produce more value than you consume. Unfortunately, there's no unit of value, although the price of the shares is value. So if you are producing more value, the shares are going up than you are consuming, then apparently you're getting a return on your investment. But if you're diluting and the share price is falling, that is a problem.
right.
I think early on we need to realize it's going to be a race to make your DAC ubiquitous, to gain market share. You're really in a race to just dominate the market. And, once you've done that, it's really hard to compete with you. It's if you have all these, there's no reason for somebody to invest in BitUSD on a chain that has very little value that no one else is using. There's no reason. It's very hard to compete with a DNS DAC if you've already established your DNS and everybody abides by that DNS system. You can't compete with it. It's going to be a race to fill that market need, and once you've established yourself, then you can charge. Then the fees are going to come. Don't worry, that DAC is going to be profitable once you're fulfilling a service for people. That DAC is going to be really, really profitable. I mean, I think Bitcoin charges maybe $8,000 a day in fees, which is still pretty small, and Bitcoin hasn't really, become a commonly used thing. But it'll be profitable. But you have to go out and get those customers and establish yourself. And in order to do that, you need to be growth focused, and you need to be able to bring in new developers. It's going to take work.
I think you've nailed it. I'm going to have to go now because on the note of getting this stuff out there, I need to work on that. But I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing here and the solid thought and discussion here. And, I really do appreciate the concept of, not diluting versus diluting. And I think that we can be the thought leaders here. I'll catch you guys later.
Sounds good, man. Thank you for stopping
Thanks.
by. Hey, while I have you guys on here, there was only a couple questions that we could have asked Dan from the subreddit today. Most of them were, one of them was, what computer or Xbox game does Dan want to play? I don't know if Dan has time to play it. if a picture of Dan playing the Xbox came out, man, there'd be some hounds called on him. But let's see what else. The big one here was by Legend Face, and he was talking about, it was the most upvoted. I'd like to talk about it just for a few minutes with you guys to see what you think, because it's a very good point. He brings up that he would like to hear some discussion of the bounties and clan C-Lane or Claim. I don't know how he pronounces it, but he's on the forums. He's a hero member on the forums. He had a master plan. He gives me the link here, and I'll just give you like a quick rundown of it. He's essentially saying that we would need that he thinks that it would be a good idea for us to all collectively start, if we have anything that we want to work on to help with the BitShares project or the community in any way, shape, or form, that we put out 2 to 3 months advance notice, like what our plans are in a central location, and all start looking over it and trying to alter our own plans to see if we can fit in with other plans. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like a mix and match, like if I see something that you're working on that might be a better tool, for instance, than I thought that I already had picked out for something that I was planning on working on. You posting that you're going to be working on it and that you'll have it done in 2 to 3 months might change the decision that I make for purchasing this other tool that I'm going to use. So on and so forth. Like having a collective place where we can all talk about this. What do you think? Is everybody completely confused because of what I said?
Now we're thinking about it.
I
think it's a good idea, but from a different reason from what you were saying. I think it's good. The difficult part in DAX, and one of the things was with the dilution discussion, is how do you coordinate effort and how do you work together? Because that's actually what the DAC is supposed to do, to distributely work together still without leadership or without central governance. And one of the things that C-Lanes proposed was similar to how the exchange works, is you put up some focal point and people will converge on that point, and that's one way to make sure that people will work together for the same goal.
Yeah, I agree with the focal point. I think what he's talking about here is if there's like a place where we could put the stuff, like where would the focal point be? And I'll tell you right now,
that's the difficult part, is to communicate it to as much people as possible.
I will say this. I don't know. Are you guys familiar with Xerox on the forums?
Sure.
Okay, Xerox has something posted that he's working on, like a BitShares.pad, I believe. This is off the top of my head right now. But basically, it's a place where we can all go and we can post things about our ideas, and they can be like essentially living documents. And it's kind of like a Google Docs in a way, but it's more of like an open source version.
I know. Yeah, I commented on the path thing. Is that now the community is small enough that it can still work like this. But if it's really becomes something centrally as a communication center for a lot of people, then it's probably not a good idea to leave it open like that for trolls to attack.
Well, have you guys
That's a bit off topic.
Well, have you guys ever thought about something like once we have all this stuff figured out, setting up like a coin on BitShares Me for perhaps like services that we do here for BitShares, we could do it for other crypto coins and crypto and DAX and things like that.
I was just gonna mention that the NEM project, they use a service called Trello, Trello, and it's just this system like I'm not that familiar with it, but it's a bunch of slides where people have put like what they're working on, and just like a big way to like crowd organize, I guess, and then that's what they chose, and they have quite the robust community behind them.
Oh, it's a free service too.
We might need to fund our own project, because I think the needs for DAC are different from a lot of other projects, and unless things work out organically, but if we need some kind of communication with each other or coordination with then maybe we need to develop the tools ourselves.
It'll be interesting. I mean, that's another place where we can reach out, and I mean, there's nothing keeping us from getting other people who know how to do these things, who are interested in the same things we're interested in, right?
I mean, you're better off if you can leverage a service that's already made to organize all this. I mean, I think that was what the original master plan, what I'm hearing, what the purpose of it was, just, a focal point, organization. And if we can find software that already exists and does that well, then that's probably, your first place to make your decision.
Yeah, but the bad thing itself, I don't think that's the best way to do it, at least that's for sure. So maybe some kind of collective calendar or something that moves for the project owner, that the project owner can move his own calendar around and other people can look what's going on.
Oh, actually, there's a doodle calendar. I don't know if you guys noticed when you log in, underneath the Kanye West coin, it says not 2.0. Right above that, I have the link to the forums and the doodle calendar link. So you guys can go there and actually, that's the calendar that Delulu is using right now for his meetup that he's trying to get set up on, like, I'm assuming, like, I would just say probably like peak times in Europe. So probably people who are on that time during the day, pretty much anywhere. Which is what, Dululo? Like, it's not Eastern, or like as far as what time zone is it?
It's called Central European Time. I don't know the English expression for it.
Central European time would probably be okay for a Google. But I guess, so we do have the doodle calendar and the Google Docs type of format for the BitShares pad. Joey might be right. I don't know what tools it offers. If anybody else is here knows a little bit more about it, but otherwise we might have to look into it further.
But the pad thing has to be centrally, or at least someone has to review it constantly. And
Yeah.
it's doesn't really allow for, it doesn't really visualize the timing. So maybe just a calendar with a block and maybe a coloring that you can just see when certain things collide in time would make it easier for people to work on. Then I suspect something like that should be on the internet. I suspect we are not the only ones trying to remotely coordinate things.
Yeah, you're right. So are you talking about something more like Outlook has, like on their calendar, they have it where you can actually share your calendar with other people and essentially see what they're doing at what time. And you can see where you can actually see visually where their time activity times intersect with others.
Yeah, something like that. But it shouldn't have to be monitored by a single person who is not necessarily familiar with your project.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So is it safe to say, with regard to the master plan, that the next step to help with this, what C-Lanes has decided that he thinks is probably important, and I agree with it, would be to make sure people know about the doodle calendar for the time being until we can find a better calendar type of service for it. And the BitShares.pad.
Yeah, the pad was somebody just put it up on a server. It's similar to Google Docs, where you can cooperate and work on the same sketch pad. But I don't think that really scales all that well. And if more docs will be coming out, then it won't work anymore.
I see what you're saying. You're thinking long term, which is smart.
Well, long term, the thing is, because the first BitShares X project was delayed as much, I think we're going to get the whole heap of DAX at the same time.
Dang, this is a good point.
So probably maybe a website per DAC does something like this, that people could register their project, or maybe we're connected to the Titan name system.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to think about it a little bit. This is something that's definitely near and dear to my heart.
This is difficult stuff for all these distributed systems. I know there was a discussion on NXT with Blue Mini, I think it was, and he was with his own version of the DAC, which to me it sounded like just placing the what you call them, the laws of the company on the blockchain, but nothing else. So it's not really a distributed autonomous company.
Yeah, so it's essentially just information on a blockchain that
Yeah.
can be changed.
And
It doesn't
with no real enforcement
incentive.
in place, and there is no organization or rules or something in place that would enforce that.
Man, a calendar service could be created. Like a DAC calendar could be created, right? There's nothing keeping that from happening.
I'm thinking more open, so not forcing people to use one thing or another. Because also it's also needs to be there in the planning phase. So I don't know if a calendar system would work. This is hard stuff, huh? This distributed organization. I know from my time, maybe it's probably some people know I come from a military background, so I had a military officer training, and they are working on stuff like this pretty
All
much
the time.
and in military
Resilient
structure,
systems, man.
yeah, but also communication problems, and when you get disconnected or you're all alone, or how all those structures just can't survive. It's funny enough, it's very similar to what we're trying to do here, even though we're not trying to destroy facilities and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're trying to build them. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but maybe still trying to survive and trying to coordinate over long distance or with separate actors. There's some interesting stuff there, but it's not really mainstream. Maybe with the virtual organizations, it is something that corporate industry is also looking at. So where you usually have one big company that does everything, they're starting to split off parts and just outsource that. So maybe we could use some theories from there, then maybe it's applicable to DAX.
Well, let's think about this a little bit more, and we can talk about it next week. We'll see where we go. I'm going to go ahead and post in Doodle. We're going to have to, we'll look into some things, and we'll come back, and I'll tell you what I've found, and everybody can talk about what they've found, and we can see where to go from there. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fair to me. It almost
Sounds
sounds
good.
like we're trying to reinvent democracy here.
Oh, well, go figure. I actually believe that's exactly what we're doing. And that's actually probably the biggest reason why I'm here. But anyway.
Does Doodle enforce a new week every? I mean, it's like an actual calendar. We almost need like something that. It seems to me that it almost be more effective just to have someone post like their times that they would be available, and then have someone decide, well, this looks like the best time. Because my understanding is that like Doodle, you do 1 week, but then the person, if someone comes across it the next week, then they put in their time for the next week, and the times don't really sync up that well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's as I see it, and you guys are going to probably have to. I don't know if any of you guys are gamers, but I was a huge gamer for a long time. And one of the things that I saw they used to for solutions to a lot of problems was you could actually create like a quote unquote instance of something, and you could even either have it passworded, or you could give other people access to it openly to work on it. And you could actually have like levels of access to, well, it was not necessarily levels of access as far as like development, but access regardless to their game, So if I could say, I could create my game and name it a certain thing. What if I could create, something and name it something, and then allow only certain people access to it by giving them the password to get in? You know what I mean? Like, so by word of mouth, the password could spread, and it could spread to the people who are trusted, of course. And these are difficult questions, because then you introduce trust of the people who have the passwords. But do you see what the concept? I mean, like you can pull up a GUI and see like search by topic, for instance, calendar program, and see what decentralized solutions are being worked on and what ones are close to being finished. the entire instance would actually be updated, and as the people worked on it, and at the very end, when they're finished with it, they could provide the link to the actual to get the program or have access to the things that are.
So you're proposing something like duck guilds for working for the community.
It's funny. It is funny. The funny thing about it to me is I used to run guilds. Like, that was what I did. I didn't like to play the game so much as I enjoyed running guilds. And it's funny that you say that, because that's precisely what I see. What I see with crypto right now is a mixture between a new economy being born, but it's going to be born with like the same flavor that the generation that is creating it. It's going to be a new flavor of ice cream. It's going to be something that these kids, all these people were born and raised, and we spend our time on the computers dealing with different currencies that really had no value outside of a game.
So, you're familiar with the gaming. Is there somewhere where I can look to how those online communities have solved this? Because they have suffered. They actually have to manage the same issue with distributed things. And if stuff gets done outside of the virtual world, how do they communicate? How do they interact with that? So maybe they have solutions that we can use.
Well, I know that one of the big ones is you start up like a guild, essentially, right? And you have your own centrally managed currency. Now with the emergence of DAX, we won't need that. We could actually use, a digital currency. But we could actually do something like that. You could essentially make a forum and a web page and have certain tasks that need done. And you're working on this DAC. You need people to do certain tasks. You post like doing certain things that you earn rewards for them. You can earn, but it's not necessarily just earning tokens, right? You can issue tokens of value, where you can trade them in for a percentage off it, some sponsoring business or so on and so forth. But you can also have it where you have like people level up their avatars.
Yeah, but you're talking about a system that's. Hang on, the dog is barking here. I'm back. Close the door. Yeah. No, but you're talking about a system that's already in place, that has already worked out the system, how to do that, how to issue rewards and stuff like that. But we don't have the system yet. The only thing we can do is, with a DAC, currently is send someone something. But what I'm talking about is the framework of communicating and interacting with people outside of the DAC, probably. I don't think we have a messaging system or public posting system in the DACs yet, I believe. So how to communicate and how to interact and how to create that platform that you were talking about.
I have somebody who I know. I'm going to try to contact them and see if I can get them on here. We'll see. I don't know them very well, but I do know them, and I think I might be able to. And he runs a website /forum type thing that's very much along the lines. He would probably have some pretty good pointers, if nothing else, that we could work with.
I think if the DACs that we are trying to get go up in value and be real professional, I think we really should also extend to people like maybe even the military, to look for people who are familiar with trying to coordinate stuff and what they found and some conclusions they've drawn. So we don't necessarily fall into the same pitfalls that they already have conquered. Why not get some value out of the military and just pumping money into it?
That's a good point, man.
I think a lot of people are just fleeing away from something while they're not really taking advantage of it as much. Look, we have the internet and stuff like that, so why not get more from it?
You're right, and we can create so many different cool things,
And they really look into these stuff like this, and they test it, and they actually and they test it really hard, harder than most corporate are legally allowed to.
These are good points, man. These are very good points. Well, it's an hour and 5. We don't have to record anymore, but what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to sign off and tell everybody thank you to anybody who's listening. Anybody who wants to edit this is more than welcome to edit and produce it on their own shows. We will be creating content like this weekly and hoping that it will gain a little bit of steam over time, and you'll see even more content coming from this and other communities. You can follow us at Beyond Bitcoin, Beyond_Bitcoin on Twitter, and please go to the Beyond Bitcoin Show subreddit where you can ask questions, and we will try our best to get to them. You can vote on the questions as well. We ask you to do that. Thank you very much, and have a good day.